So friends, through Professor Bajaj's lecture, we are now face to face with an activist poet, a poet who takes a position in America and takes that position as a woman who will not take any kind of unjust development in society kindly, and she would like to fight for her own rights, and then she is a civil rights activist, as Professor Bajaj has pointed out. So now let's see how this thing is manifested in the poetic expression in the specific sense, and for that I request Dr. Bajaj to takes an example from a poem or a poem itself and tell us how she does it, in artistic aesthetic terms. So yes. Over to you once again, Professor Bajaj.
Thank you, Professor Prakash. I will, in this lecture, speak of Maya Angelou as a feminist voice, as a black feminist voice in literature. I've discussed her humanism and how she's somebody who has worked to how she believes in collective strength and the responsibility of an individual towards society. This I have discussed in some of the poems in my previous lecture. In this lecture, we will focus on her feminist works such as Till I Rise, The Caged Bird also to some extent, and Phenomenal Woman. Now what you find here is that resilience and a sense of grit and survival or a sense of defiance is very strong in the poem Till I Rise, right? It is a poem which celebrates a sort of a woman's empowerment and the ability to forge ahead despite adversities. So that is one aspect of Maya Angelou's poetry. Now the second one which I wanted to discuss was the Phenomenal Woman, which is again a woman a poem which is rooted in the prejudices that tries to talk about the prejudices that are there in society. So the standards of beauty set by society and how she what is her take on it. So these are some of the things that we'll discuss in this section of our lecture today. As we go to Phenomenal Woman, I'll just read out some of the passages and then we'll have a discussion on them. Now, in Phenomenal Woman, which came out in 1978, she says, "Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model's size." And so, before I go ahead, look at the categories that she's built. That there is a pretty woman category that has already been built in cinema, in popular culture, where where the pretty woman is supposed to be white. Obviously, is supposed to be thin. It's supposed to be coy, maybe, and also have a sense of charisma around her. But she says, "I am not this kind of a cute girl." Right? Because she doesn't fit in that pattern, which is the masculine idea of pretty. She's not a cute woman that or a cute girl that men would want by their side. So she says, "I'm not cute and I'm not built to suit a fashion model's size." Now again, critiquing this kind of a fashion industry and the whole network of the model size of a thin woman or a slim woman, or how women are made to subjected to this standards of beauty built by society, by a masculine society. And she says, "I am not all of that." And so pretty women wonder why I have this pride, where my secret lies, because I'm not cute or built to a size 0 or a size 1. I am a woman. I have a woman's body. So there is a sense of assertion of the female body. Also the assertion of the human female body as it exists, and not trying to fit in a certain kind of paradigm or a kind of a certain framework of the beautiful woman or the pretty woman. And then she goes on to say, "When I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies." So, there is this kind of a woman who's understood or interpreted as a woman based on her bodily features, and the woman that she is, that is the woman of ideas, the woman who has intellect, and where the body almost becomes negligible or is not the question anymore for her, because the woman for her stays in the mind and not in the body so much, or at least she's she's happy to carry the skin and the body that she carries, and is not daunted by the patriarchal masculine conception of the pretty woman. And she says, "I say it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips." Right? So she's not again she doesn't again shy away from talking about her body parts also, and talks about them in a very almost insolent way sometimes, but in a way that because that's the only language she says that will answer, the male fantasy. Yeah, how do you see that?
No, definitely. She doesn't want to become, a product that is that is made by the society after its own interests, and she wants to, individually assert herself as a person.
Right.
So she prefers to be a citizen than a woman.
Right.
In
No, but
sense.
woman as she is, and not, as you said, I would say patriarchal society for that. So, and she says, this, and I quote, "The stride of my step, the curl of my lips, I am a woman phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me." So there is a sense of assertion, and there is repetition often in her poetry, which is a sense of assertion in her poetry, that you find that she keeps repeating these words, "I'm a woman phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me." So there is a sense of self-worth that she's trying to instill. And then she says, "Men themselves have wondered what they see in me." Right? Again, the idea that men can't figure what they see in me because I don't fit in their standards of beauty. And then they tried so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. So there is a sense of the outer and the inner dichotomy that is played out
How
here.
do you explain phenomenal woman? Would you like to explain that for the benefit of the
so it's
viewers?
not, so she doesn't explain phenomenal, but I think it's her capacity. She says a woman's capacity to do multiple things and be multiple people at the same time. And this is something that is overall present in her works, that we have this kind of a undying spirit, and this kind of the capacity to rise to action. So there is this sense, which is why she says that I'm not defeated even when you defeat me, sort of a thing. And I think that is what she means by phenomenal woman.
She wants to create a phenomena that is pro-woman, and where the woman is seen as a positive subject in society.
Yes. And again, she says this phenomenal woman is somebody, she says that it's my inner mystery. Right? So she says that men wonder what's there in me because they can't touch my inner mystery. So I think she creates this kind of an inner world, the world of women, a sense of internality that she has, and the outer perception or the outer figure that she carries, that is her body, her face, etc., that is constantly under scrutiny for being never the right type. Never the right type of skin, never the right type of color, or never the right type of...
Anyway, she is raising her voice against animalism. She is a woman, she is a person.
Yeah.
She is a person with intellect.
Yes.
So people generally interpret women as animals,
right,
who have just contours, physical
right,
contours, nothing else.
Exactly. So there is this then, sense that she's trying to critique in the idea of her, and therefore it's one of her feminist poems, where she talks about the phenomenal woman as the new woman also, that is coming to the fore and is trying to assert herself and is also claiming her own space in society, and doesn't shy away from talking about her body or as she is. She exists as she is, and she's comfortable in her skin, and that in itself is a very problematic thing for a masculine society that is set on the idea of always fitting into a kind of a masculine standard.
And she's asserting the primacy of ideas, right, of the position in society.
Right. So similarly, she talks about this in another poem of hers, which is obviously one of her famous works, really, which is titled "Still I Rise." And this sense of resilience that I said, this that she remains undefeated, is continued in it. Again, in "Still I Rise," you can see both the persona. Like in Phenomenal Woman is more woman-oriented sort of poem, and it's written from a woman's point of view, and it's not necessarily a black woman's point of view. She, in fact, mentions that this poem was written for all women, and again, of course, you can say that black woman, because a black woman certainly doesn't fit in the idea of beauty. She's exoticized, but she certainly fit in the pretty woman category of a slim, short, cute, white girl, right? So that you can say. But again, in Still I Rise, she takes this idea forward and talks about, that how, talks about her own strengths in this poem. And I quote here from the poem. She says, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise." Right? Now, the idea is here that she's looking at the, this again, the UI format, the kind of dialogue and the kind of, it's not just actually a dialogue, it's actually a kind of a clash or a debate that she's already entered into, and a conflict of perspective that she's projecting here in the you and I. So if you notice, it was also there in Phenomenal Woman, right? She says, I say it's in this, and they ask me what is the secret of her fame, and why is she so liked. So there is a sense of, there is always the perception and her rebuttal in many ways that you find in a lot of her works. Again, when she talks about this in Still I Rise, you find that there is a you who's trying to write her down in history. Now, who is this you? This you could be the male subject, but this you could also be the white subject, right? And if I could just put them all both together, then it could be the white male subject. So the white male history or the white mainstream history may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. Again, taking up the fact that you can write in history the lies that are twisted, give lies in history, and you may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. So the idea of the capacity of this woman to not give up, and also a sense of resilience to bounce back when you trod. She says, you can trod me to this dirt, but still I'll rise like dust. Again, she goes on, she says in the poem, and I quote, does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Right? So the idea that she's insolent, and she doesn't take, she's not a mute observer, and nor is she a submissive subject in that sense. So and that upsets the white people. That upsets that. How is it that a black woman is able to hold her sassiness, as she puts it, or this kind of haughtiness? She will mention haughtiness also in the poem later, that she's haughty and she's sassy. Being a black subject, she doesn't have those natural attributes of being submissive and meek and accepting. And this is something that Maya Angelou, in her autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Birds Sing, says that when her grandmother says this is how life is, she says that I will never be like this. She says, I will never accept this meekly and mutely, I will resist. So there is a sense of protest and resistance throughout this kind of poetry of hers, I think. So she says, and the idea that, as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room, the sense of pride and sense of confidence that anyone would have if one had oil wells in one's living room is what I have, even when I don't have them. Right? So there is a sense that it's not money, it's not power, or it's not fame that brings this sense of self-worth and pride, but there is a kind of a innate, inherent pride. And what is the nature of that pride? The nature of that pride is the kind of suffering that one has gone through. Also, suffering for Maya Angelou is something that makes you stronger. Right? So she keeps on doing that in her poetry as well, suggesting that this is a result of many episodes of suffering, but now that she's turned into this strong woman, nothing can pull her down. So that's the kind of image that you see also in this poetry, in this poem. She goes on, and I quote, you may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I'll rise. So as dust I'll rise, like air I'll rise. So there is a sense of, do you see a sense of rhetoric also over here?
Oh, no, it's not rhetoric. In my opinion, it's a very strong statement she is making, and perhaps she is siding with the common masses who don't have that kind of individual identity. But well, you can't crush them. You crush them and they'll rise again.
Right. So that's, there is a sense that people think that, it's a rhetorical sort of a thing that keeps going. But I think that she's trying to constantly go back to and, bring these words back to suggest that how a sense of pride and dignity is inherent in all human beings, and they are not dependent on money, fame or power. And in fact, suffering on the other hand refines a sense of pride and refines that sense of self-worth and dignity in a person better than one who probably has oil wells in one's living room. What do you think?
No, this is absolutely true that when the woman of Michelangelo,
Maya Angelou.
Maya Angelou, has to project, then she is siding with people, she is siding with common masses, she is also siding with poor, whites as poor blacks. So she is that kind of a universalist and a humanist, as you called earlier. So she is, I think, a force to reckon with, and she has the power of ideas on her side. So
and also power of poetry.
Power of poetry, yes.
Yeah, very lyrical, very strong. She's able to use the exact phrase and the create an image around it also.
There is a question I would like to raise here. You have mentioned patriarchy. Patriarchy now is not just a condition but a structure, and patriarchy is sustained also by religion. So what is your take on religion, Christianity, and all those things?
No, she doesn't take. She is not religious in that sense. She is not Christian, but she doesn't denounce as such Christianity, but she can see the loopholes within it. She sees that it binds you. So while she's
the role of Eve, for instance, Eve is supposed to sustain Adam,
right.
that kind of a thing.
Yes. No, but I think she is trying to bring it to a kind of a because you see, she constantly sees herself as an African subject also. She is American, yes, but she went to Africa also for a brief stint, and she was in South Africa, also. So the idea, and she was deeply impressed by the developments in at the time, anti-apartheid movement. She was a part of it. So the idea that as an American she might have a Christian strain also coming from her grandmother, who was very deeply religious, but as an African subject, she sees the loopholes within Christianity also. So I think there is she doesn't go out and critiques it outright, but she's definitely not she doesn't adhere to any religious Christian standards in her poetry, and rather talks about them as in fact very different from or distinct from this kind of a framework. So
that way she is a humanist, and she believes in society and its energies, and she would like to project those energies in her poems.
Right.
And she'll stop there because she wants to unify people. She wants them not to be alone, but she want them to be collective.
Yes.
And she want them to move forward on the path to progress.
Yes, very humanist turn, because when she takes a very humanist turn, talking about dead bodies of children in ponds and all of that. So those are the kind of images that exists. So the kind of pain as a poet that she feels for the country and the people and the problems. There is a strong sense of history in her, because the past seems to keep beckoning her. In fact, in this poem itself, Still I Rise, there is a section where she says. Let me just quote that section for you. It says, out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I am a black ocean, leaping and wide, swelling and welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that wondrously clear. So the idea that and there's another following this, there is also this section where she says, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave, I rise. So the idea that there is a sense of history and a sense of social responsibility, that I am the dream and the hope of the slave. That dream is realized in me, and I need to carry this struggle forward. So there is a sense of social responsibility, a very strong awareness of history and one's past, and what the fights of the ancestors, as she puts it. So she says, I'm not going to let them down, and I'm not going to give up in this fight, and I'm going to continue with that sort of battle. So I think that is what defines her poetry more than anything else. Their nights of terror and fear that they have gone through, and she says that now is the daybreak, and I'm going to fulfill my responsibility as a poet and a black American woman, and take the struggle forward. So I think this is what her poetry stands for to me.
Is there something connecting her with the common phrase, the common language, the common symbols? Because she is not an academic person. You said that she didn't go to the university and get a degree, and she learnt in the university of life. So that kind of language, does it create an aesthetic which is entirely different from the aesthetic of poetry of the time?
Yes, in the sense that as I mentioned earlier, that she uses a lot of dialects, and the language. For instance, I know how the caged bird sings. This is it's a title of her work. So and all her other poetry collections or her autobiographies, all of them they take a very straightforward, simple language forward. They don't go into metaphors or symbols. Even when she takes these symbols, they are taken from common life. So it's not like she's building on a phrase or talking. She's lyrical for certainly, and because of being a singer and a dancer, she has a natural rhythm in her speech. So also being a black person, and she was a part of the Harlem Writers Guild, where all these people came together. They wrote songs, they wrote their poems, etc. So the sense of lyricism is natural in her. But beyond that, there is not that kind of academic academic engagement with poetry as such. She was teaching in, she started teaching also and taking lessons with students. So she said that, I am a teacher who also learns and also writes. So in a way, she did finally at the end of her life see herself as a writer and a teacher, even when she did not go through this kind of an academic grind. But I think her language is very straightforward and simple, and captures the essence of daily life. So and deliberately uses music and dialects, the black dialect into her. She uses that in her poetry. That I find very interesting. Like for instance, her poetry collection. Another one is like Now Sheba Sings the Song. That's the title of the poetry collection, because one of the poems is titled that, and Still I Rise, or I Shall Not Be Moved. These are some of the poetry collections that she has. Think of the poetry collection that she has, Just Give Me a Cool Drink of Water Before I Die. That's the title of a poetry collection. So it's not very usual practice to have a sentence as poetry, as the title.
She's not writing for the scholar. She's writing for
Right.
the common person, the
Yes.
common individual, whatever you call it. But then she wants to appeal to the popular kind of interest that is there in society.
But also the blacks, because again, when you think of it, give me a cool drink of water before I die. Now the before is actually in the dialect just the for, and die is D-I-I-I-E. It's not usually. It's also, I think, trying to tweak the English language as it is spoken by the black people and not by the whites. So there is an assertion in just the title that it's not D-I-E but D-I-I-I-E, suggesting that that's how it is spoken, among the black people. So emphasizing that dialect is also, I think, a political sort of practice to give a sense of identity to the black culture and the people who are a part of it. So I think that is something that she also does in her poetry, using a lot of dialects here and there, and musical quality. All those things, I think, make her poetry specifically black, but also woman-centric. So these are some of the themes that I see in her poems. Also the Caged Bird, the poem Caged Bird, where she talks about where she makes a distinction between the caged bird and the free bird, and she says that the free bird claims the sky as one's own, but the caged bird is the caged bird, she says, stands on a grave of dreams. So a grave of dreams, again, if you notice, is something that is not very or shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. Again, words which are very colloquial, words which are very simple, dreams and screams. That's how she also rhymes them. But talking about wings and the feet, I felt that this poem is a poem which is very simple to read and understand, and most of her poems are like that. They don't necessarily work with jargons, or they don't create a kind of a world that is not relatable, or a world that the common people would not know. And which is why a lot of her works have made into these classroom situations, school curriculum, etc., because she can very easily be read by school students. So I think that is part of her agenda also. that she talks about.
There is one question that I would like to raise, and this is slightly critical, that Harlem Renaissance is supposed to be overemphasizing the blacks in society, and that separated them from the white population, even though exploited. So how would she sort out this problem, where she had, as you rightly say, carried the influence of the Harlem?
Yeah, so she joins this Harlem Writers Guild much later, but you see, in the beginning when the Harlem came, as you said rightly, that they tried to build their own culture because they felt that they had to preserve their own culture, and very soon it became popular culture. A lot of it was visited by a lot of writers and even white people later on. So it is actually the beginning of jazz music also in many ways. So it was that, I think, in the early part of the century, that is the 20th century, but by the time we reach the 1950s or so, they are trying to keep it alive, the black arts movement, and to give the black identity a culture. So I think at this point it may have been an act of preservation for those who are trying to build a society and build their own culture and preserve their own culture and call it distinct, and maybe therefore there's a kind of a reactionary attitude maybe towards the white, because already you see all these people who come and live in Harlem, there are a lot of these people have come from the south, from the deep south, because they were not accepted in the deep south, and the prejudices of the white people in the south made them leave their own country. And let's not forget that all these black people who lived in the south, for them that region was their homeland, but they had to move to a new place where they thought they could give education to their children, where life would be better. So already they would be slightly wary of the kind of people who they'd encounter. So there is a sort of a mutual sort of suspicion, I think, in the beginning, but very soon, once the education is in place and the segregation continues, as I told you, the Jim Crow laws were there. So this kind of segregation continued, and by the time you reach the 1950s or so, it has turned into it's a movement which is a civil rights movement now. So it is Harlem Writers Guild is also working towards creating a culture for the black people that the world can see. So also to take it forward, take the tradition forward. So I don't think it is reactionary or at this point built on isolation. Rather it is to spread the values of the black people, or to spread the cultures of the black people all across the world.
So friends, Dr. Bajaj has presented this poet's case as the case of a humanist, the person who would like to join all the right people, all the justice loving people on one side, and from their side they would argue the ills and evils of a system which is based on class distinction or color distinction or other things. Maybe against women they would like to say certain things that are not exactly dignified, and she is fighting for those things. And there are lots of questions that Dr. Bajaj has raised, and they'll require perhaps more consideration at your level. You read other poets, and then relate them with the perceptions that Dr. Bajaj has shared with you. Thank you.